Was there anything better as a small child than curling up in the corner of a playground with a new comic? That brand new comic smell, the feel of the waxy pages on your fingers, the excitement of joining your favorite superhero in battle against the very clutches of evil. I apologize. I got a little overzealous there. Well, when it comes down to it, comics are a huge part of both childhood and adulthood for people around the globe. In fact, I'm not ashamed to admit I have quite a few of my favorites in my collection. The issues from Demon in a Bottle, absolute gold. That being said, it's no surprise that people are willing to fork up a fortune for beloved comic books from yesteryear. Some comics even sell for millions. Today, we're going to take a look at the 3 most expensive comic books ever sold. Fair warning, you might want to prepare yourself for the most expensive. It's a bit of a shock, even for a comic book lover such as myself. Number 3. Amazing Fantasy, issue number 15. Our 3rd most expensive comic is Amazing Fantasy Volume 1, issue number 15, coming in at a whopping $1.1 million. Released in June 1962, this comic marks the introduction of Spider-Man and many other familiar faces. Seeing as how he's become such a staple in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's hard to imagine there was a time when Spider-Man wasn't swinging through New York City saving the day. This comic serves as an origin story for Peter Parker and Spider-Man, starting with his identity as a nerd, then progressing to his radioactive spider encounter, and finally, ending with the tragic death of Uncle Ben. This comic did a fantastic job of telling the world who Spider-Man was going to be, and what kind of story he was going to tell. After realizing the man who killed his uncle was a thief he had the chance to stop earlier, our boy Peter is confronted with a horrible revelation that carries many of his storylines. With great power comes great responsibility. With all that packed into a single comic, it's a bit of a given that this made it into one of our most expensive comic list. In addition to being one of the most sought-after issues, this comic was rated a 9.6, the highest grade ever given to an Amazing Fantasy comic. Oh, the things I would do to get my hands on this. Even with all those bells and whistles, and a price tag that matches that of a mansion, this comic still falls massively behind the next 2 on our list. Marvel Comics number 1. Marvel Comics number 1, the very first domino in a long line of Marvel creations, sold for a startling $1.26 million in a recent auction. It seems you can't do anything nowadays without seeing something from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's certainly not a bad thing. It's truly incredible to think all these blockbusters, all the posters and action figures that are lining my man cave, all began with this single comic. Even more surprising, this single comic was released way back in 1939, the very year that World War II started. While people in Europe were just beginning preparations for the Long War, children in America were dipping into a comic that would one day be worth millions. The Marvel comic was created by Timely Publications, a company that would eventually become formally known as Marvel Comics many years later, in 1961. This issue introduces the Human Torch, a superhero who was wildly popular up until the 1950s. And I mean, how can you blame anyone? All he needs to be a powerful weapon is a tiny bit of oxygen, and then wham! Pow! He can take anyone down. Unfortunately, the Human Torch hasn't quite been so popular since then, unless you count his appearance in the 2015 Fantastic Four movie, which earned itself quite a few Razzie Awards. At any rate, it's good to see issues with his face on it are still going for millions of dollars. There is one more comic that sold for more than double the price of this one. Even as much as I love comic books, I just can't quite justify this price. Number 1. Action Comics number 1. If you're a true comic book lover, the comic which has landed in our number 1 most expensive spot shouldn't come as too much of a shock. However, the price it just sold for might. Action Comics number 1 sold for $3.2 million. For that price, you could buy a private island, private jet, or a mansion of your choosing almost anywhere in the world. But why pick any of those when you could purchase the first introduction of Superman in near mint condition? Published in 1938, Action Comics #1 is widely regarded as the story that started the superhero genre. Truly, what a way to begin. Superman is the hero I've idolized since I was a small child. Well, I mean, who wouldn't want to be a devilishly handsome, intelligent man with superpowers? Well, I've already checked off 2 of the 3 boxes here, but the superpowers would certainly be the icing on the cake. It is currently believed that only 50 to 100 original copies exist today. That means those who have managed to hold onto a copy are sitting on quite a gold mine. While 4 of the copies have sold for over $1 million, this copy is the first to cross the $3 million mark. And it's been on quite a journey to sell for that price. Purchased originally from a newsstand in 1938 for what would be the equivalent of $2 today, the owner then kept the magazine tucked away with a stack of others until his death. Luckily, his home was located at a high altitude in West Virginia, a climate that helped preserve the comic in all its original glory. The magazine then changed hands twice before it was put up on eBay. The seller preferred to use eBay rather than a high-class auction house, solely because he felt it was a better reflection of the pop culture nature of the item itself. It was there that the magazine fetched $3.2 million and its top spot on my list. There you have it, the 3 most expensive comics of all time. I don't know about you, but I'm rather tempted to go digging through my attic to see if I can find any of these laying around. If you could have any comic book in the world, what would it be? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'm Mr. Luxury, pip pip to doodly doo.